Hey everybody, this is Perch. A thought just kind of dawned on me looking at some of my videos and other things, and I want to kind of push for the value of context. Now, this may be a weird video to make. This is definitely not going to be a high-ranking subscribed video. That's totally fine, but it's important because here let me give you a good example. Right now, Jonathan Hickman is stepped back from the X-Men title he was writing, and Jerry Duggan has taken over. They've relaunched the book and everything else, and Hickman's not on an Active X title. He is still listed in the books as the head of X, I think is the title that they put on him, and a lot of people equate it, including me, to like a showrunner type position. He is writing Inferno, which is a 4-part series starting in it's September, I believe, or is it October? But anyway, it's going to hit the end of the year. And I'm noticing an argument has set up, and to me it's a defeating argument. It's a pointless argument, and the argument is one side, and I'm just acknowledging that yes, there are people who are going into the nuance for sure. I'm not saying there's not, but I'm summarizing because I can't make a 50-minute video with all this stuff, and who would want that anyway? But basically, the two sides kind of go. Number one, Hickman's gone. He's left the X office. He's left the X-Men. Hickman's out. And number two, the other side says, no, Hickman's still there. He's being printed in every comic. You're being ridiculous. And this is where the two sides then argue, but there's no real common ground between the two of them because kind of both are ignoring somewhat the obvious. In the first case, no, Hickman is writing another comic. It's Inferno. It's not a regular monthly book. It's an event type thing. And what is Hickman doing after Inferno? We don't know, but like I've done some videos on and reading Jordan White's interviews, it does not appear that Hickman's back on a regular monthly book. It appears that he's going to be basically doing, one-off events, and he's going to be the showrunner role. Now, what is the showrunner role? What does the head of X mean? Because comics hasn't had a lot of this. It has from time to time. There's been examples. In some ways, I think Bendis was describing, his role a bit this way when he was managing kind of the Avengers books, and there are other people doing kind of Avengers Academy and some of those things in that world. I think Spider-Man has kind of flirted with this concept from time to time, but the problem with it is because it's undefined, it's hard to really know, how involved is he going to be? Are we talking about that he's going to be there looking over every script and making course adjustments? If you equate this to TV, showrunners can be all over the place. It can be somebody who's very hands-on. Frank Darabont. I forget the guy's last name, but anyway, he worked on Walking Dead for the first couple seasons, and he was reportedly very hands-on. So much to the point that some directors didn't like to work with him because he would adjust things. He wanted a creative direction that was very consistent. There's a whole controversy around that guy, so I'm not bringing him up to open up a whole new can of worms. But anyway. Then there's also showrunners who do close to nothing. They come in, they say, here's an idea I have, and then they go away, and the actual hard work is done by the writers. Where is Hickman? Who knows? I think we can speculate. I think you can speculate with some analysis. I think when I look at the X titles, they seem, creatively, they're written very, very differently. It doesn't feel like there's too much synergy going on. There has been a couple instances where they show kind of the Avengers Mansion in one book, and then they're referencing the Celestial Mountain in another. So there's some general kind of things, but where does that fall with editorial? Because you also have an editor listed there as well as a showrunner, and what exactly is going on? We don't know. So it's hard to tell. If you've read a lot of Hickman stories, then when you read, the X-Men books, they certainly do not sound like him. The X-Force and Wolverine have a very different style than Excalibur, which sounds very, very different from New Mutants. And so there's again, we're guessing. It doesn't seem like Hickman is super hands-on with these books, but again, who knows? Maybe he's there every day in the Slack group, adjusting and commenting on things, but it doesn't come across that way. And at least some some of what you can read into the interviews doesn't come across that way. So it doesn't seem like he's terribly involved. On the other hand, but that's where I'm talking about. A lot of things in comics have this kind of detailed nuance to it, and it feels like it's a bit of a trap. It's whether you want to call it, gaslighting or strawman or whatever dumb Twitter word you want to use to describe this. Again, it is weird when somebody shows up in the comments and they like, that's a straw man. But whenever they use those terms, which I rarely throw out. When I do, I'm being extremely sarcastic. That's a little tip. I always like my opinion of the IQ of the person writing plummets. And there in many cases, people I think use those terms thinking that they're sounding smart, but I tend to read them and I can't not hear Twitter language coming out of there. And so it makes me think the person is dumb. Anyway, weird little thing. But it gets us nowhere when you're saying, no, Hickman's completely gone. Well, obviously he is not. Marvel is still using his name. Marvel is sending the guy a check for something. And maybe it's just a check for him to sit quietly and allow them to use his name. That's possible. Claremont gets a check for doing way less than what Claremont should be doing for Marvel. But also I think taking the stance of, hey, he's involved. He's there. I mean, okay, his name is in the book, but where? What is his contribution? What is his? I think a lot of people have this idealized idea in their head of there's this room of writers, and they're all sitting there in beanbag chairs, and Hickman's sitting in the center of the room going, all right, guys, brainstorming time, let's go. And that they're collecting ideas, and he's like, take that idea and turn it a little bit this way, and we'll run with that. I think that there's this fantasy notion of what's happening that does not reflect reality at all. And this isn't a guess on my part. I mean, you can read the interviews and can see this. But if you go down the line, whether it's with comic numbers and sales, whether it's what's going on with digital, I mean, you get whiplash if you try and follow the conversation around digital, because you will hear at different times companies and creators talk about how the future is with digital and everything is with digital and so on. I just realized I sometimes as I talk, I kind of tap my hand against the table, and I'll bet the microphone's picking that up. I've noticed some comments saying I'm hammering my hand on the table, but yeah, man, interesting. To control my hands. Wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. Anyway, there's a lot of my point here is that there's a lot of areas where you can successfully argue both sides of things, and I think people do, and they do it to kind of entertain themselves. But it doesn't really get anyone anywhere, and it's why I push kind of in these videos. It's not a fence-sitting position. It's a let's get to the actual details position of what we're actually talking about, because almost in any conversation, both sides have some element of truth that they're anchoring off of in order to make their argument. But the thing you need to do, or at least that I do, is to try and get rid of the fluff and the hyperbole and everything else, and get to what are the common elements of truth there, and provide some context. It's really the only way to get answers. If you don't do that, I think you allow yourself to just kind of stay in this weird nonsense zone. It doesn't get you anywhere. I in particular, I think there's a lot to learn about comics. I think that there's a lot of interesting strategy and development that can occur, and I think there's a lot of room for improvement. And so the more that we can kind of push on those angles, the more that we can kind of figure out what is the truth of things, the better. And again, it's very frustrating. It's much easier and more fun. I would have more fun with a scenario where the X Office, Jonathan Hickman's there, and he's bravely trying to tell a good story. He's like, no, guys, I can't tell this story about old plant grandmas. I've got to, Moira's here and Nimrod, and I've got these huge elements that I have to do. And like Teeny Howard is like, haha, I'm using my tarot magic to cast a spell on you, and then you're going to write nonsensical garbage. And Jordan White ties him up with his ukulele. And I mean, that's a fun scenario. I like to imagine that, but the reality is oftentimes just way more boring. It's hey, Jonathan Hickman, this is pure speculation on my part. You have a 3-year contract. but these comics are doing slightly better than we thought. So how about we give you extend that to 6 years instead? And you don't have to write some of these books, and you can just kind of oversee it and take this money. And Hickman's like, yeah, that sounds great to me. I mean, that's what I would do. I have no idea. I've noticed Tim Seeley was going he was with Chris Arant, who is one of the writers, editors, leads for Newsarama. Now Game Informer? I don't know. But he's like, what thing should I ask? And Tim Seeley goes, I wish that the fans could be educated more, because they say stupid stuff and they know better than the people who are actually working in comics. And it was kind of a funny conversation to read, because, I mean, bluntly, I think everybody has a lot to learn about comics. Certainly fans, absolutely. Customers, there's a lot of misinformation going on. As you've been listening to this for any length of time, one of my huge pet peeves is overships and how people constantly misrepresent what those are. But there's plenty of comic creators who don't, need to learn this stuff as well. I mean, I don't think there's a high ground to stand on when you have the kind of argument we had a week and a half ago between Dan Slott and Rob Liefeld around numbers, where, a very prominent writer was just relying on a completely stupid Polygon article for data that was just completely wrong, and a remarkable amount before the tweet got deleted of comic creators and writers were in there liking it and retweeting it and be like, facts. And it's like, no, not facts at all. That was bluntly wrong. So not only does it look just kind of bad, I think some fans claim they know better than us. Well, some fans do. I'm sorry. I mean, that's not meant to dog anybody. It's not meant, I'm not insulting anyone. It's just, look at the optics in the room. When you have these kinds of things going on and a lot of lack of information, maybe now is not the time to brag about how one side knows better than the other, or do what you want. I mean, I'm just saying it looks weird for what it's worth. Anyway, there you go. There you go. It's a crazy time. Thanks for listening.